All right, we're going to call to order the October 2nd meeting of the West Sacramento City Council and Redevelopment Successor Agency and Financing Authority. We're going to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'd like to invite our guests to join the council and staff in the pledge, which tonight is going to be led by Christian Balabagosa.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the council did meet in closed session this evening to confer with our real property negotiator regarding negotiations with Jamboree Housing and the West Gateway Place Phase 2 project, and no action was taken. So with that, we're going to proceed to item 1A, which is the presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. As is noted on our printed agenda, the Council is prohibited by state law from taking action or having a discussion about items that are brought up under item 1A, but it is an important opportunity for a public forum. We ask that anyone wishing to address the council on this or any other agenda item tonight to please fill out one of the yellow cards that's available near the front door and to turn that card into the city clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer that we use that just make sure everybody gets a chance to be heard, and to that end, we ask that comments be limited to no more than 2 minutes. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart, and that flip chart just indicates which agenda item we're talking about in case it's not clear from the actual discussion. The clerk accepts the yellow cards all the way up to the end of the staff report on any particular agenda item. Once the staff report's concluded and the council questions and or the public testimony have begun, she doesn't take any additional cards. So if you happen to be here for, say, item 12, just be sure to get the card in before the staff report on item 12 is complete. We also recognize that for some folks, speaking in public can cause anxiety and hives and other nefarious symptoms. So we just ask that there be no boos or catcalls or even applause or other demonstrations. We try to maintain a civil discourse here in the chambers. So with that, we have a couple of requests to speak under item 1A, and the first is by Emma Vieira from the Yolo Food Bank. Welcome.
Good evening, Emma Vieira, Yolo Food Bank, Nonprofit Partner Coordinator. I am responsible for managing the partnerships with our 76 nonprofit partners in Yolo County, 20 of which are based right here in West Sacramento. These include YCCA, Shores of Hope, Communicare, Sacramento City College, Mercy Coalition, and Trinity Presbyterian. Michael Bish, our Executive Director, is attending an event this evening with a number of large food donor prospects, so I have the pleasure of addressing you in his stead. Over the past 3 council meetings, we have shared a mountain of evidence with you regarding the alarming levels of poverty and food insecurity in the capital region, in Yolo County, and in West Sacramento community. These studies make clear that poverty and food insecurity pose the single greatest challenge to community resiliency, imposing staggering costs on health and wellness, mental health, educational outcomes, homelessness, worker productivity, reduced economic output, and the like. Tens of thousands of our residents are bearing these costs directly, while the overall community is bearing them indirectly. If you recall, a 2018 Brookings Institute research report was the first study we cited. It reported that 34% of the households in the capital region do not earn enough to cover their basic household expenses. The report also stated that the capital region is the 84th worst ranking region in the U.S. in regards to economic inclusion. We recently called the Brookings Institute researchers to discuss their findings in greater detail, as well as the recommendations. The researchers said transforming the poverty status quo in the capital region requires implementing systematic, collective, and cohesive solutions. Such solutions require your leadership, which is why we have been appearing before you meeting after meeting. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you. And then we have 2 requests, but I think I might ask our Deputy Doug Rose to introduce this first, because they're requests, but they're also requests that we had asked to be with us this evening. So, Mr. Rose, could you give us a quick introduction and context?
Yes, of course. So we have Christian Balabagoso here and Isabel Brambilla. They are 2 youth members of our community. Christian is a senior at River City. Isabel is a recent graduate who is now pursuing her degree at Sac State College.
Stingers up.
Stingers up, indeed. And the reason for them being here this evening, the U.S. Conference of Mayors hosted their first annual Youth Summit in Los Angeles in July, first week of July, focused on how youth across the nation can get more involved in the civic life of their cities in particular. We had great input from across the country. Many cities brought their youth reps, and it was a great opportunity for sharing of information, mutual learning, and I hope a little bit of fun as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Christian and Isabel to talk about their experience, their takeaways, and what they've brought back to West Sacramento.
Terrific.
Hi, I'm Isabel.
And I'm Christian.
Yeah. My biggest takeaway from this conference, it was a pleasure going, and thank you, Mayor, for taking us. My biggest takeaway from this conference is that you need to have youth more involved in city affairs. Usually everything's planned out, and there's adults on the panel, and there's adults speaking to you, but what you don't have is a youth voice advising you. Not everything's going to apply to youth the same that way that it applies to adults. So I think a thing that'll benefit everybody, and it'll benefit your city and make it better, is having a youth voice on your council panel.
And we had 4 distinct panels at the Youth Summit, building effective youth councils, organizing youth town halls, creating a culture of service, and fostering youth voter engagement. I personally believe that fostering youth voter engagement to be the most interesting out of the panels because of its relevance here in the community. Youths are generally not known for their stellar political engagement, with our generational group being known for the lowest voter turnout out of any age group. I think that discussing the ways to bridge this disconnect between youth and voting not only helps teenagers stay civically engaged into their adulthood, but also more involved in their community as a bonus. The other panels, based on youth councils, what this city does not have, and youth participation in public service opportunities, I believe are already accomplished through the city's home run internship program, which includes various internships at the city hall.
The next one is we were talking about what we found, what our breakout sessions accomplished. And what I learned during one of ours was I learned how to get people involved, especially youth. Our generation isn't really known for getting involved because we're just, there. This was good going to this panel because youth don't really know how to get involved, because there's not really enough opportunities for us to get involved, or there are and we don't really know about them because they're not presented to us enough.
And a multitude of ideas were brought up in this breakout session based on fostering youth engagement. There's a general consensus that one of the largest barriers to voting is simply its inaccessibility to the people. And I can say with confidence that out of the things a teenager generally worries about, that registering to vote is far below a lot of other things. To overcome this, our group kind of determined that helping students at their respective high schools register and setting a federal holiday for election, they would be 2 effective methods of engaging youth voters.
I was on the panel with the mayor. I was on the panel that was called Fostering Youth Voter Engagement, and there I was asked a barrier that youth tend to face when it comes to voting or registering to vote. And I talked about how youth aren't trusted enough to decide to vote or aren't allowed to be involved in politics. There's a mental factor in this that always seems to be overlooked. Adults want us to be more mature and responsible, but when it comes time to decide what's right for us and the path that we need to take, we're just simply children. I think that you need to break down that barrier and relay it to the youth that we're trusted enough to make our decisions because we're the next leaders of this country and you need to trust us to be the next leaders.
And after this summit, my experiences have brought me to make kind of small changes in the way I approach kind of conversation with my peers at River City High School. I hope to make kind of small differences, no matter how small they may be, to help engage my peers in their civic duties and voting. Just through normal everyday conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both for joining us this evening, and just to paint some context around this, this was a competitive application for youth in our community to participate. We had a lot of youth step forward. Christian's been a part of our city internships programs. Isabel is a graduate of the SACOG Youth Leadership Academy. Just as a pitch, the application period for next year's SACOG Youth Leadership Academy is still open, so we're looking for more folks from our community and throughout the 6 county region. But two youth leaders already in our community in different ways that we selected to go down to Los Angeles. They joined folks from all around the country, and some folks who are some famous youth activists, like David Hogg from March for Our Lives, and many involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, and a wide range of extraordinarily active and impactful youth leaders across the country. And I know both Christian and Isabel, when we arrived, were like, what are we doing here? In this room with all of these, important people and these loud people, and they rose to every moment. Anxiety about participating turned into grabbing the microphone. I went to a press conference with Mayor Garcetti of Los Angeles and all the other youth leaders, and you can see the pictures of it now because Isabel is right up front and Christian is right next to her. In every single photo, they elbowed their way in front of mayors from Louisiana and Georgia and elsewhere in the country because they wanted to be seen. They wanted their community to be seen. They wanted youth from this area to be visible on that national stage. And Isabel was on that panel on youth voter engagement, brought forward issues around mental health that no one else had raised in the entire summit, and was captivating and really changed the conversation about youth engagement to more than what we normally talk about, the kinds of things that we normally talk about, and really think about the experience of young people as they experience it in voter engagement. And so the voter engagement is not something that happens to youth, but that youth are leading and leading from their own lives. We also we beat many other cities in the bowling challenge. Not surprising, being the home of Capitol Bowl. We knew we had a very, very heavy responsibility to bear to represent, and just for the only other moment of fun was to go to the Grammy Museum and watch these two try to figure out who all these people were from the 60s, 50s, 40s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. But a really special experience, and I do want to acknowledge the U.S. Conference of Mayors that they made an exception. They were flying people to the summit from all over the country except Californians, but we insisted and they agreed to cover the cost for Isabel and Christian to fly to this event, and they certainly proved their worth and the importance of and what West Sacramento youth have to offer, both across the country but right here at home. So thank you both for your service in so many different ways, but for your leadership at the summit and for the lessons that you're bringing back, and I hope and I know for your continued leadership to make real the ideas and the priorities and the commitments that we all made at that event. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ledesma.
Just want to say thank you both, and kudos to you for, as the mayor said, rising to the occasion and putting yourself out there. I know that can be nerve-wracking. I can imagine doing it at your age, and you did it, and you represented our city and the youth of our city very well. And it means something to me because I have a couple of teenage daughters who sometimes reluctantly have been involved in our public life that we have, but they've seen what you can get when you get engaged in specific issues. So I applaud you for bringing up the issues you did and representing the city, bringing up the issues of mental health. Thank you. That's important to me and my family. So thank you for bringing that up. Again, it's just to me, it's just extremely proud, I guess is the word, to see you two from River City and from our community represent such a prestigious and visible event. And thank you also for carrying the mayor in the bowling challenge, because I know I've seen him bowl before, so thank you for winning that. But again, good for you.
I think Doug was the best bowler of all of us.
Yeah, Doug was the best.
Yeah. All right, thank you both so much. And let me also commit, I mean, we are, the lessons that you brought back, we're committed to as well. We have, we're one of the only cities that has a Parks, Recreation, and Intergenerational Services Commission, where youth are intended to be part of the most important decisions in the city. That said, not enough youth sign up, and so it's on us to make sure that we get the word out, that we, with both of you and with others, to help recruit more and more young people, not just for that commission, but for many other opportunities to engage and to guide and to make the decisions, because as we said many times at that summit, these young people are not the leaders of tomorrow. They are the leaders of today, and our civic organizations, our city institutions, and what have you, have to push the rest of us aside and make some room at the table. So, thank you for being here tonight, and we're looking forward to continue to work together.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're both really grateful for this opportunity to you, Mayor Capaldi.
Yes, you're great.
Thank you. All right, so with that, we'll proceed to item 1B, which is council communications. Are there reports from our official assignments or other communications? Councilmember Sandin. And I should just note, Mayor Pro Tem Orozco is unable to be with us this evening due to a family conflict.
Thank you, Mr. Let's see. Going off. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The West Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency met on September 19th, and as council may have read in your council newsletter, we awarded a contract for design of the YOLO bypass levee project that will enable the West Sac Area Flood Control Agency to advance design of the next increment of the West Sacramento Federal Project, which is the YOLO bypass levee project, to the 65% design milestone. And we also approved plans and specifications and awarded a construction contract for the Southport Levee Drainage Improvement Project. The Delta Protection Commission also met on the same day, and we received presentations on the governor's water resilience portfolio and the Delta Conservancy Proposition 68 grant program. And I'll be sharing some preliminary background information with the city manager that I received at that meeting. Earlier tonight, the Port Commission met, and we heard a presentation on a proposed facility expansion from River City Rowing Club and the Lake Washington Sailing Club. I also attended last week the California Indian Heritage Center on-site tour event, where the city was recognized for our donation of lands to the project. And I, this morning, participated, I believe Councilmember Ledesma did as well, in the National Walk to School program. At the school site I was at, Jason McCoy, who's the supervising transportation planner, also joined me, and we had it was a really successful program at Lighthouse.
Terrific. Thank you. Councilmember Guerrero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to thank the California Coastal Commission and the Delta Protection Commission for, and working with our West Sacramento crew. Councilmember Ledesma and I participated in the Delta Waterway Cleanup this September 21st, along with the YMCA's Youth and Government Program. Quite a few students came along and joined us and did some cleanup along the water and the walking path where our beautiful barn is located.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Ledesma.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Sandin, for bringing up this morning's national, the Walk to School program, which I also participated in this morning. Brisk morning. It was cold, a little cold this morning. And kids were in shorts, but they managed it. But we walked, joined some of the students and teachers from Our Lady of Grace and walked to school and learned quite a bit from the kids and what they have to endure in that intersection around Our Lady of Grace. And Sarah and I learned quite a bit about some of the safety issues they have around there. So talking with the principal and Sarah, that's something the city's focused in on and will continue to do it, but it was very worthwhile. I also yesterday attended, represented the city on the I Street Bridge Replacement Project Selection Committee. We heard an update on some of the revisions to the bridge concepts that have been forwarded to the community, heard about the outreach, and some of the data gathered from various community members from all over Sacramento and West Sacramento, the attendance of some of the community events, one we did on the riverfront and on our side of the riverfront in West Sacramento, and all the events I've been told has been very present. At least over 50% of the attendance and comments are coming from West Sacramento. So it's nice to know our community's super engaged in where we're going with that bridge. But the purpose of the meeting was really for the selection committee to start hearing some of the feedback from what they've learned and on the existing concepts. They provide some revisions. The anticipation is they'll continue to make some revisions. We gave them some feedback. There's another community engagement meeting coming up on the 17th of this month, Thursday the 17th, another community workshop, and they'll start to forward some of those concepts out to the public. There'll also be a virtual community workshop between October 22nd to November 5th. So again, the community will have a option to look online or attend the community outreach, but it's super important folks begin to see the options, see sort of what the design requirements we have, because it needs to be a drawbridge, and also the costs involved. We're starting to talk about those a little more to make sure the public is fully engaged on what our choices are. So we are looking at a timeline of continuing to get feedback, and then December or January is being able to look at a selection at that time. So I know Mayor Cabal and I are both on the commission. Mayor Cabal couldn't make it yesterday, but it was a good meeting with Congresswoman Matsui, and then from Sacramento, council members Harris and Hanson. And then I do want to make a plug in for another commission I sit on, which is the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change. We continue to meet. There's a lot of subcommittee activity. We're nearing toward the next commission meeting, which will be on, I want to say the 23rd of this month, here again in West Sacramento at the CalSTRS building. We're nearing towards recommendations on the mobility recommendations. We had a workshop on that at the last meeting in September. So we're going to further the notion on where the Technical Advisory Commission came back on that. So feel free to attend. But I also want to make a plug, and I know the youth are standing outside. If someone could open the door and tell them that at River City High, we'll be sponsoring a youth summit on climate change. So to their point, we know they'll be living with our decisions today on climate change, and we want to hear from them now. And so the entire region is invited. We're promoting it to high schools. I know the mayor tweeted about it this morning. We forwarded it on to, of course, students at River City as well as other high schools around Sacramento and around the region. But they're invited to come to River City from 9 to 1 o'clock. Lunch will be provided at River City, where it will be facilitated by youth. To hear their views on climate change. So it's a really exciting opportunity for those at home, for those that are here and want to pass on the news. So look on Twitter or Facebook. I think it's starting to get out there, but again, it's Saturday the 19th. So we're looking forward to that. And I believe that's all I have for today.
Great, thank you, Councilman Ledeza. I have just two quick reports. One, I participated as a speaker at the Recite global conference in Prague 2 weeks ago, or last week or 2 weeks ago. They'd invited us to present on, just take a step back, this is a global architecture, design, planning conference of academics, but mostly practitioners and professionals in the field. And then it seems like it's also like part music festival or something. I don't know, the Europeans do things a little bit differently. But they had asked me to come and present on a few panels and podcasts on how cities that aren't London and Paris and Los Angeles and New York, and we're not quite at that scale, how does innovation work? What are the implications for, the theme of the conference was regeneration, but what are the implications for gentrification and for climate adaptation, a host of other issues for which apparently we have a worldwide reputation. So it was well received, a lot of Czech and European media about West Sacramento. So I didn't get the chance to meet with the artist from Subtile, who's Czech. By way of Argentina as well, but that sculpture is well known in Prague. The West Sacramento sculpture on the waterfront is well known in Prague. So, interesting thing. I've been putting this one off for a while, but it was a good promotion for the city, and I actually learned quite a bit about what other cities are doing and some of the key issue areas that we're concerned about in terms of redevelopment and gentrification. And then second, just to pitch again, the regional forum for SACOG is coming up next, at the end of this month, and registration's still open, and so if, any members of the council are able to attend on that day, there'll be a host of important and informative guest speakers, but also a lot of work done around the regional vision and response around a whole host of key issues facing the region. Oh, I should also report that I did, pursuant to our legislative policy, at the recommendation of the city manager, did execute a letter urging the signature on the EIFD legislation as well. So, all right. So with that, then we'll proceed. We have no appointments tonight, so we're going to proceed to the consent agenda, which is items 2 through 10. Are there any items to remove or any items for separate question or comment?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor, there was a letter at our seat to remove, I believe staff's asking us to remove item 8, or is that right? Okay.
All right. So at the request of the city manager, then item 8 will be to continue to October 16th. Is that what the request is, Mr. Manager?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So if there's no objection, then that'll be the order. Any other items?
I would like to comment on item 3.
Anything else? I have 1 and 5. So item 3 is consideration of resolution 19-94, amending the fiscal year 2019-20 capital improvement program to defederalize $2.665 million in grant funds awarded to the West Sacramento Plug-in Partnership.
And you could just remain seated, because I just want to make a comment on this and thanking, no offense, Sarah, I saw you this morning though, but just the staff, and just this is super supportive of this, and I know this has been amplified a little bit through the work of the Climate Commission, and the tremendous opportunity this brings to look at the city, scope out the city, where we can possibly put some charging stations around at really strategically important areas, and this sort of helps cut through that a little bit more. I think as electric vehicles grow in popularity and demand, one of the hindrances of this is finding areas to charge them. So just want to thank you for this, and like I said, this was a really good move to make to kind of streamline it, so thank you.
Great. All right, item 5 then is consideration of adoption of a resolution 19-90, did I just read the same one? No, 19-95, approving an amendment to the capital improvement program, approval of plans and specifications for the targeted traffic operations improvements project, and awarding a construction contract to F. Loduca Company. All right, so the staff report makes reference a few times to the priorities or the selection criteria that have been approved by the Transportation Mobility and Infrastructure Commission. I didn't see those here. Has that framework come to council yet as well, or?
Correct. That was something that was taken to council in, I believe, 2016, after the recommended projects were taken to the TMI Commission.
So the commission's framework for how to prioritize was brought here at that time?
To my best knowledge, I believe it was.
Let me try to help Ryan a little bit on this one. The city used to have a residential traffic calming program that staff would get many requests for, regular requests for traffic-related concerns. And as we acknowledge that program is no longer in existence, in trying to prioritize the many requests that come in, we actually took that framework to the TMI Commission, and the TMI Commission agreed that staff would meet regularly to try to address some of these concerns. To the best of my knowledge, we have not brought that to council. But the requests for these improvements continue to come in regularly. So therefore, staff continue to try to meet and address these requests from our citizens, and then we would go to the TMI Commission and ask for assistance in helping prioritize these projects. This particular item contains a project that is many years in the making. which is why we're here tonight, asking for your support to award it.
Okay, yeah, no, that last part I understand, it's just that the staff report references that the commission has provided a prioritization procedure and recommendation list, and so I'm trying to ascertain whether or not that prioritization procedure and recommendation list has been forwarded to the council in some form.
No, actually, staff does meet regularly, including police and fire, every 2 weeks, at least a couple of times a month, to attempt to try to prioritize these requests for service. And then on a quarterly or biennial basis, we would go to TMI Commission to ask for support of how we actually prioritize these requests. Then we would come back to council. For this particular project, we actually, through the budget process and the CIP process, we asked for these targeted traffic improvements last year. So that's really our approach. We have not formally come to council and established a framework for prioritizing these requests.
Okay. We should. So, I mean, this topic has a long, exciting history in the city. I mean, I think, as I've said before, that my very first appointment as a council member was to the traffic committee. It used to be chaired by a council member, and then also to have somebody from the police department and somebody from Public Works on it, I think, where we went through all of these. I mean, the fundamental challenges with it is, as you've suggested, the demand for stop signs, speed humps, and all other forms of traffic calming or targeted traffic operations improvements is far in excess of the resources, and it's an infinite pool, right? You know, even if we open a brand new neighborhood to all the latest specifications, it's pretty predictable that within a couple of years, somebody will want it to install speed humps in it. So it's a never-ending, bottomless set of demand, and we have very limited, they're expensive projects, so we have limited resources. So that's on the one hand. The other is I mean, if we have any resources, we have to be more transparent about how we're allocating them. And so I think it is important for us to sort of lay that out. It doesn't mean that it's just you punch it in a formula and it comes back yes or no, because there are a lot of things that need to be considered in making those judgments. Some of which are traffic operations stuff based on all the stuff that the traffic engineers know. Just posting a speed limit lower than how fast the cars go is both ineffective and illegal. Adding stop signs at every single street just reduces compliance with stop signs. So there's a lot of things that we know on the engineering side around traffic operations that are not immediately apparent to members of the public who just want a solution. So you've got to grapple with that. Have to grapple with the fact that we don't have that much money, and at the same time also understand sometimes a traffic calming project becomes financially more viable because it's right next to another project that we're already doing, and we already have a crew out there, so it might be a little bit cheaper. So there's a lot of factors, but laying out what is going to be considered and by whom goes a long way for neighborhoods to just understand, okay, I see why I haven't been funded yet. It doesn't make everybody happy, but it does provide a bit more democratic transparency around how the decisions are getting made. So this is not an urgent thing, but I do think we should be moving towards the direction where we're able to basically articulate to citizens, here are the criteria, and also realistically, here are the number of projects that have been requested, and here are the number who've been approved. Maybe that's even on the petition form. So you know when you go out and get your 50 signatures or whatever, you have some realistic expectation that it's not likely to happen next week. So that we manage a bit of the expectations and also help folks understand why they may not have been chosen over somebody else's stop sign halfway down halfway across the city. So I'm supportive of these projects for sure. I just think we should keep evolving more and more towards a system that is clear with members of the public about how the decisions get made. Because we don't really make them here, and the way you've described them, the commission's not really making them because they're only seeing the ones that you want to do. Yeah. They're not really evaluating all the ones that were just below the line and why, and maybe that is something that the commission should be doing. Perhaps the commission should play more of a role like the traffic committee than it has, that might be a solution to it too. But I do think only saying, staff, tell us, go into your room, put on your hoods, and then come back out and tell us what the smoke decision was, that's not a viable long-term solution to the issue of transparency around the decision-making.
I'm just going to underscore it because given the experience of this morning and talking to the folks around Stonegate and London, and talking to neighbors in recent weeks, it is a need to underscore and articulate what is the process. And I appreciate you pulling this one because I thought I had understood, oh, good, the TMI is involved, but it's really not. So I think that's, just to underscore that point, then being able to tell residents exactly what the process is and what the criteria is to kind of get up in the ranking or where they are would be helpful. And not as a way to tell, again, I think people would understand there's other things I know the police and others can do to educate the neighborhood on slowing down, and there's ways to do that, but I think it would just help.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so those are the only questions on the consent agenda. So is there a motion on the consent agenda minus item 8?
I'll move to that. Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Sandin and seconded by Councilmember Guerrero. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. That motion carries. That brings us to item 11, which is consideration of a workshop on the West Sacramento Mobility Action Plan.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. So I'm here this evening to provide an update on the status of the West Sacramento Mobility Action Plan, or the MAP, and to request some early feedback from the City Council as work is really just beginning in earnest on this project. And well, I'll just start in a little bit on the background. As you all know, here we go. The MAP has been listed in one form or another on the strategic plan as a high priority since 2016. As you might remember, the MAP was originally born from City Council's direction to staff to develop a public transportation strategy back in 2016 in light of various concerns regarding the existing transit network. And back then, staff did present to the City Council, and you provided additional direction that encouraged staff to be a little bit more innovative and holistic in developing a solution to that call to action. So from that process, the MAP was introduced in spring 2017 for the first time as an effort that would assess the transit network to identify opportunities for streamlining and enhancements, but would also work to integrate multiple modes, including new and shared mobility options such as rideshare, bike, and scooter share. And it would also take a look at emerging trends and technologies and how we could better integrate those into our mobility system. So that being said, there were a couple of early action items that came out of that, as you are well aware. One of those being some modifications to the yellow bus system, including some rerouting to create 20-minute service with a downtown shuttle, as well as the pilot and continuation of the VIA on-demand rideshare program. So that being said, the City Council authorized staff to move forward with an application for funding to the Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant Program. The first application was unsuccessful, but we did receive funding shortly thereafter. One thing I want to note, you may be wondering what's been taking so long with this project. We've had a couple of delays since the funding was awarded, one being that we were awarded SB1 funds that were somewhat threatened around election time last year. So we held off on doing a procurement until we knew that those funds were not going to be off the table. Upon entering into the procurement phase, we did have a non-competitive response to the first RFP go-around. So we were just able to bring forth a request for award of contract to WSP USA Inc., who is here tonight, and the City Council approved that back in June of this year. I also want to mention that YCTD did apply for and receive funding around the same time for a comprehensive operational analysis. We'll be hearing a little bit more in the next item. But for that reason, staff did elect to rein in this transit streamlining and enhancements component of the map scope so that we can be a little bit more efficient and coordinate with the efforts that are going on at the district level. So that being said, the map has officially kicked off at this point. As shown in attachment 1 of your agenda report, work has been initiated on the development of the vision, goals, guiding values, and evaluation framework. And I think it's important to note that the map is not seeking to completely reinvent the wheel. We're acknowledging that there's a number of adopted and existing plans and documents, including the general plan mobility element, the bike ped trails master plan, the smart cities framework, and other ongoing efforts such as the plug-in partnership or the outcomes of the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change, all of which will need to be integrated into this. And as map concepts and recommendations are developed, there's going to be various opportunities for public outreach, ranging from pop-up roadmap events that will be held throughout the city, a few traditional community workshops, some targeted stakeholder outreach to community-based organizations and experts, as well as online platforms. In addition, the key first step in developing the map will be conducting a mobility network analysis. This effort is going to be trying to leverage available data from across modes, so this includes transit, rideshare, what we're able to get from bike and scooter share, and really start trying to better understand some of the barriers and opportunities that exist across the different modes in our mobility system. And we are currently exploring the purchase of some big data to utilize on the urban footprint platform to do some advanced analysis in that regard. So this effort, the map effort, is also just seeking to synthesize some of the projects and priorities from across the number of adopted plans that I just described, so that we have a little bit more of a comprehensive picture of the planned transportation system and the direction that we're going. This will enable the project team to begin developing recommendations related to the siting and programming of mobility hubs, as well as related to smart mobility readiness, which are the next steps in the process. So ultimately, this is all going to culminate into a draft mobility action plan, which is intended to serve as a blueprint for multimodal investment by identifying the most catalytic projects for achieving a smart mobility network and prioritizing near, mid, and long-term activities based on the map, goals, guiding values, and evaluation framework established at this time in the process. So at this point, like I said, the team has developed some preliminary materials for City Council feedback. However, I did just want to emphasize that this workshop is also just about reinitiating a conversation about the map, since it has been some time since we've been to Council on this subject. And also to ensure that staff is just still on the right path with this effort, and to provide City Council with an opportunity to request any refinements, potential course corrections, or other desired outcomes from the map while we still have an opportunity to incorporate them. So that being said, I am pleased to introduce the WSP team, Project Manager Christina Svink and supporting staff Sahar Shirazi, who are going to be further discussing the materials that have been submitted for your consideration this evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us here today, or tonight. We're really excited to be part of this project. We feel that it's just kind of another first for not just the city of West Sacramento, but also the region, and continues the innovative spirit that the city has shown through previous projects. And those are the types of projects we like to work on. So as Sarah mentioned, outside of some of the policy and specific project recommendations that are going to come out of this study, we're also going to be providing the city with the tools that are necessary to compete for some important grant funding so that you can actually implement some of these ideas and kind of continue on with the innovative spirit and realize your progressive vision and goals. So to start with the project, we crafted in collaboration with city staff some guiding values that are here up on the screen. And these values really provide a connection to some of the efforts that the city has already undertaken, which Sarah mentioned before, and really connect them to the MAP effort. So we also worked with Sarah and her team to develop a study vision for the project process and to help kind of define some of the outcomes. And these are really revolving around some key tenets like equity, expanding mobility opportunity for everybody in the community, achieving sustainability goals, and aligning mobility more closely with land use decision making now and into the future. And And so it's a comprehensive vision that really kind of brings together a lot of the different visions and goals that have been identified in other efforts for the city. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Sahar now, who's leading our framework development, and she's going to talk a little bit more about our goal setting that we've worked on.
Thank you. So as Christina mentioned, we did look over the existing documents, existing plans, projects, but really also through sort of best practices, what's happening around the country, around the world, and making sure that we're continuing that effort of being forward-thinking and thinking about the innovation that's coming out. So with the vision and the framework, Oh, boy. Okay, there we go. To excuse me.
So the heading of the slide is need, express bus route to Sacramento. Why doesn't this gentleman get on VIA, go to the bridge and hop on a jump bike for the remainder of the trip and be there in 15 minutes for $4? I mean, why is our immediate conclusion that what is needed is a traditional form of transit, but faster, but with fewer stops or something?
Sure.
Push, not just tonight, but our entire partnership together will be pushing on innovation. It's not a disposition, it's not a culture, it is a set of disciplines around doing certain things and not doing certain things, and thinking about transit as the thing as opposed to the rider is one of those things. So this is one I'm flagging, maybe planting a flag on it for our later conversation about how we're gonna approach the notion of innovation and user design and things like ice cream.
Sorry, things like ice cream?
We'll get to that. Flag this issue because this is very much how we would traditionally think about these questions, is sort of leaping to how do we make that traditional thing work a little better?
Right.
And how can we get that down to 32 minutes? Sorry, Mr. Ledesma?
Yeah, well, I guess it's just a little about where we're going, and I get your point, because I'm with you, but on kind of conceptually where we might end up. But are you expressing here sort of the questions that you're pursuing in this example? So how would you depict an equity issue that might currently exist, and how do you expose it? What data are you feeding it? And then this is just an example of an outcome that you might think of, and it's not the one, but I'm more after understanding the dynamic of the 30-year-old professional or the 86-year-old woman who needs a walker and wants to get her haircut at Supercuts for the first time and without somebody, it's just, those, how are we going to get those dynamics to kind of feed into that, and kind of getting these outcomes? And maybe you'll answer that later, or how?
Councilmember Guerrero did.
I did have something to add to that as well. In looking at some commuters that are more long-distance commuters, for example, Bay Area commuters, they will be jumping into a car. And so, there's going to be a lot of layers from everybody that you're hearing, modes of transportation to accommodate different population types that are here in our city. As we continue to grow, that we're looking at who we are having to work with today and then in the future.
Right, absolutely, and I think that's why we want to examine the demographics and the equity issues alongside the actual system itself and what is available and what could be available to make sure that it could actually be utilized by the people that need it and not just be placed there because it's available. Community in addition. And I hand it back to Sarah.
All right, so we did present some of these preliminary materials to the TMI Commission on September 9th. I will say we have modified what we brought to you tonight based upon their feedback and on additional refinements to the materials. But in general, we received some really robust feedback from the TMI Commission, and all of their comments were unanimously recommended to be forwarded to the City Council as summarized here. Generally, many of the comments related to really emphasizing that we make sure that we acknowledge existing gaps in infrastructure, not just look at new things, and make sure that social equity is a lens over the entire MAP effort. They encouraged us to utilize non-traditional outreach strategies throughout the process, to leverage data from across the new and emerging mobility options, which we are. And they also asked us to pay special attention to areas of freight where there may be different types of conflicts and make sure that we're considering all users and all contexts on the road, as well as the importance of coordinating with land use and ensuring that we're incorporating both qualitative and quantitative metrics into how we prioritize projects down the way. So that being said, again, we're here. We're really just getting started with the project. We're at a very preliminary stage, and we're here to request City Council's feedback if you have any clarifying questions. We did include some guiding questions in the staff report, which are also displayed on screen. But at this point, I'll conclude the presentation and open to any feedback or comments that you may have.
Councilmember Ledesma?
I'm going to bounce around a bit, but Sarah, thank you. And I know this process is sort of getting, I don't want to say thrust back on us, but it's something coming back to us after some time. And I understand the reasons why, and they're all good reasons why, so I don't want you to feel as though that was an issue. But so on the outreach, first of all, I'm trying to scroll back to the task plan that you had around kind of the outreach, and I just want to, I don't want to steal the mayor's thunder a little bit about the ice cream story, so I'm trying to tread lightly.
Go ahead.
No, it's your story.
No, it's not my story. It's her story.
It's her story, but you brought it up first. Okay. But the challenge I have, and I see Jose here. Jose, thanks for being here today from YCTD, because we're also going through some other feedback we're going to hear about next. And so the outreach part, and you scroll through the slides pretty quickly, but the framework for that needs to somehow encapsulate, we're looking at those who take, or we're looking at modes, or those who take transit or depend on it or some way or another. And that's not always the case of where I think the sentiment needs to be, or the outreach needs to be. And this is an issue or a question that I've always had with kind of how we can do things better at YOLO bus, right? And we can only survey those who get on the bus, and that's our only frame of reference to the service we're providing, and maybe what's needed. And what at least Jump and VIA has exposed to me personally is there are stories of those who would take it if. And so I'm trying to understand the outreach and trying to understand how we get that kind of feedback into this process. The outreach of a mobility action plan may not land on the common commuter who's getting in their car every day from Southport, from Bright, from wherever they are to get to downtown Sacramento or Davis, wherever they're going, because they really haven't thought about an option. What's occurred to me as a result of VIA, which is going into neighborhoods and areas where, the traditional fixed routes don't go, it's exposed a need for a system that nobody really understood I needed it in the first place. And I always think of the iPod, which became the iPhone, right? Everybody was happy with their Walkman and whatever else for some time, and nobody really understood that I needed that phone until they presented with, I could have a mini computer in my hand. And same thing with, how do I get around? Which was to me, when this concept of a mobility action plan came to me, it's the concept of walking out the front door of wherever you are, or getting ice cream at Devil May Care, or leaving Walmart, or wherever you are, and saying, what are my options to get back home or get to that place? And you didn't know you need it until you saw a VIA rideshare show up, or a red bike on the corner, or if you're close to a bus stop in maybe that's, you see it pass by and you can grab it in that, 5-minute span, whatever. So again, I'm trying to understand how the outreach would work to solicit that feedback to inform kind of where the mobility action plan goes.
Yeah, and I'll take a stab at this, and feel free to contribute if there's something you guys want to add, but
One of them, though.
just one.
But
That's fine.
When multiple people,
Totally.
we get into, and another thing, and what she just said reminds me of this, and then we're here for.
We're not going there, don't worry. That being said, I think that, the VIA process is actually a really good example of, we didn't know what the solution was going to be. We led with hearing from the community, hearing from council, workshopping a problem, and slowly evolving into a solution. And I think the map is really just an amplified version of that. We're not going to be going out just to specific users of specific modes, but some of the roadmap activities are the purpose of those. They're pop-up, they're going to be, at major events, at the grocery store, at places where we'll catch those who are currently not using the bus or VIA or Jump or whatever it may be. And I think our hope is that we get a better understanding of what other barriers or what other challenges exist that there may not be a solution for if there are. And, slowly work our way towards potential other alternatives or other opportunities to better integrate those modes that already exist in the system to make them all run more seamlessly together so that that person who does go to Walmart comes out and they're much more aware of all the options they have of how to get home. So
Right.
I don't know if that totally answers your question.
It does, because the pop-ups, and the outreach, I'm thinking about going to places where it's not really apparent we're talking about transit, but just people gathering at this place, whether it's the Nugget, or again, you name the place. That would be important. I would also, I'm glad you brought up earlier, whoever brought up earlier, it's not lost on you that there's been a lot of feedback gathered through the pedestrian master plan, pedestrian bike master plan, and the other things we have gone through, because there's been a countless amount of feedback around what we can do better. And even, you say, you and I were there this morning, and I don't want to say we got an earful because it's negative. It was actually very productive conversations around, I would encourage the kids to walk more to Our Lady of Grace, but this intersection was terrible and dangerous. And those are cues and clues that, again, people would walk more or use a different mode. And it's not necessarily that, because obviously kids can't ride a jump bike or whatever else, but somebody did this morning. But my point is that the feedback has to come from places we don't suspect it or people would predetermine it. And so just as long as we're taking that step is my point, and trying to get that and listening to other spaces will be important, because I think that will help inform us a little more. And then the only other, I love this subject because it's getting at that concept. In terms of the goals and the equity one, and I think this is where the mayor was going and listening to what's in those stories, right? And that was the part that VIA exposed to us, right? At least to me, was the notion that an elderly woman who was not able to buy ice cream because she took the bus and it took her 40 minutes to get to wherever, and it would melt after a trip to Walmart, and communicated to somebody, and I talked to her afterward. She was so happy that I can take a VIA and be home in 10, 15 minutes, and she can have an ice cream at home. That's the kind of equity issue that, I think we're getting at, quality of life and equity issue, that we need to make sure we're thinking about. I think that's part of it. A lot more of that is in qualitative, probably data, and again, back to the outreach, whatever, but it is going to be important to listen to those stories, because they're kind of all over. I took one Saturday, in the same trip via Saturday, two students, and on one half of it, and the other half of it was a mother and a daughter heading somewhere north from the store. So again, it's just you kind of pick up on recurrent themes and how people pick up their groceries, get to the store in the first place, so they can carry groceries more point to point. But again, it tells you something about quality of life and whatever else. And the final thing I want to make sure we do, because we're going to talk about it at length, the next item, which is, and you put it first, with the synthesizing of all these modes, right? And it's one of the reasons why we're doing the comprehensive operation analysis, because we've had in the context of VIA, we have had conversations about what the fixed route lines and, how, that was the original intent when we even started this and talked about 39 and how we might move that. We were trying to synthesize, at least early on, how it might work. But now we're getting real data back, and we're going to get real data back from the COA, and we're going to get real data back from what you have. So that very much, to me, is the goal we should be looking for, because the intent was for all of us as partners, us and YCTD and everybody else, is to look at the service as a whole. How can we make it more efficient and, most of all, more usable to reach some of these goals throughout the city? So very much supportive of this, and I'm sure everybody has more comments and questions about it. But I think we need to synthesize, to your point, the data we're going to get from the COA, which we're going to get you guys a sneak preview on here in a few minutes, and then whatever all the other data we can get, and share that back, because that's the outcome I want, and it's based on all the issues you brought up earlier, the goals you had earlier. So those are my only comments right now.
Yeah, part of the confusion that is here for me, at least, and a lot of this is that we don't need this is not a process to rewrite the transportation element of the general plan. And so it's not a policy document. This is around anticipating, designing, making space for actions that would not have otherwise occurred, right? So I struggle with the document because it's all of these policies that are they're already all in the general plan or in some other plan that we have. And they're great policies. They're mostly suffocating to innovation, though. So they're, in some sense, the opposite of what you need to really look at what are the things that might emerge. So, for example, we've had this conversation before, but this notion around it's a policy which I support. I voted for it 16 times. But let's see, new mobility and technology products and services should be implemented in accordance with city goals so as to not to disproportionately benefit advantaged neighborhoods nor unduly neglect or burden any population. So this falls into the category of, it's not an action plan. We're now going to tell you all the actions that cannot happen. So that is the easiest cop-out way of making policy possible. Right? No idea should happen unless it promotes climate change, reduces inequality, reduces traffic, gives more time at home or whatever. Okay, but what is it? What's the actual action then? Come forward. Let me see something that's going to accomplish that. And that's not how a city works. A city works in fits and starts with different things happening in different places. We don't say there's no barn, for example, on the waterfront until every neighborhood and every income level has its own, entertainment and alcohol facility. You take the win that you can get, and then you open up access to the rest of the city to this location. So you don't start with, here's all the things that we are not going to allow to happen. And I struggle with a lot of these policy statements because they're the right policies, but that's not what this is. We have a general plan for that purpose. Instead, we're trying to design what's the right environment, what are the right knobs that we're going to set to maximize the likelihood that unexpected ideas and solutions will emerge, and that we will see that ice cream problem. Because if we had done, no matter how many surveys we did, no matter how many sidewalk word pop-ups that we did, she would never have said, my biggest pain point in mobility is I can't get ice cream. Yeah. Never, ever. And that ice cream story is the most profound, most powerful story that we all tell, you too. We all tell this story all the time, all over the planet. And it's the one thing that people in the community and everywhere else in the world says, I get it. I get what you're doing there. I get why this matters. And it's the one thing that would never emerge from VMT. In fact, it adds to VMT because she's now going out getting ice cream more often. And it would never emerge from asking her in advance. The woman in Valhalla who calls Gladys up and says, let's just go spontaneously get lunch after Days of Our Lives. She didn't know she had a Days of Our Lives gossip problem as a pain point before. It never crossed her mind. And so asking these kinds of questions always leads to the same answers. Can we get more bike lanes? Can you do this? And those are all important things, but we have done survey after survey after survey after survey after survey after survey after survey. We already know those things. So public engagement that is about asking people's opinion about the existing systems and places isn't unimportant, but it's not really the task of this project, and nor is planning literacy, which I have a big problem with the equity and privilege dimensions of that as well, because the folks who are working the swing shift in 2 jobs, that's not an achievable goal. It's really empowering a certain set of folks in this conversation. But that aside, but also nor is it a goal, I don't care if not a single person, including me, knows what the mobility action plan is. So, one of the objectives of the public engagement plan is to get the word out that this is happening. The objective is we want to serve people. We want to understand, how we can, as opposed to sort of toot our own horn that we're looking at mobility issues, which is not really important. So this engagement piece, I think, is one of the areas that really could benefit, along with the policy piece, from distinguishing very clearly, is what we're about to do the mobility action plan, or is what we're about to do the general plan transportation element? And if you just ask yourself that at each point, each bullet point, I think you might get better clarity around where the value add is here is in this process. Because I'm really excited about it. I mean, I think this plan, even thinking about this plan, is what's led to so many of the innovations that we're really proud of in the community. And so, taking it all the way, I think is I'm super excited about it. But the plan should push us, not constrain. It shouldn't hold us back saying don't do these things. It should push us to be, and you and community and partners to say, hey, that's a place to try something. That's a place to invest. That's a place that'll at least give an ear to interesting and good ideas. I think the other thing the plan has to do is account for some of the vulnerabilities and threats in the system that we currently have. So the potential for automated vehicles and technology on the stuff is both an opportunity and a threat to the systems, to lots of different systems. So we do need to account for that. So what are our no regrets strategies in that domain for the next 2 years? What are they for 5 years? What are the things that we need to be evaluating 2 years out to see where this is going? What were the questions we should schedule on our agenda for 27 months from now to see where is the market for that now? So I think we have to look clear, not just what are the policies that should govern, if there was an AV environment, how do we make sure that it's equitable and efficient? We're not ultimately going to decide most of those things, but having a strategy for how we're going to adapt and iterate as we go, and what kinds of questions we will ask and where we're going to get the data, really I think is important. But also understanding what is the future of jump? I mean, is bike share and scooter share, given what's happening in other parts of the market, is this a vulnerability that we need to be thinking about in this system? What are the implications of AB5 for rideshare in the city, which we sort of take for granted right now? People can take Uber and Lyft and other options, and what does it mean if those options aren't there any longer? So really those are not questions that are in the general plan. But they very much drive what are the parts of the system that we need to fill in, what do we need to operate, what public-private partnerships do we have to look at, all those sorts of issues. So I think thinking about that as opposed to sort of the universal policy questions will be really useful to us, and to think about expanding the pie more than the relative. Right? It's not really that we need to spend more money on biking, walking, and less money on cars. We need to do more on biking and walking. Period. That may mean less money on cars, but that's not our goal necessarily. Maybe it isn't from the Climate Commission. Maybe it will end up being a goal. But as a mobility question, maybe it's not our express goal to do that. We may be able to grow the pie. Maybe we can add ice cream without telling somebody else that they can't get to work any longer. Or we have done that. So I think it's an opportunity in that space. The other part of the ice cream piece, I think, is and it's not really reflected as much in the goals and the guiding values, is what we've talked about several times up here, which is the rest of transportation. The transport's not just about how to overcome your daily pain and your deficits. It's not just about getting to a job, to a medical appointment, or to jury duty. It is also about the joy of movement, the joy of discovery, the joy of connecting with other people, the joy of experiencing what the community has to offer, the joy of volunteering. And although we don't have great metrics for all those things, that doesn't mean that they don't matter. And in fact, I think the ice cream and Days of Our Lives examples are examples of how much we really do value them once they become visible. And so accounting for those and not thinking of the transportation system solely as a social service system designed to help people meet their deficits, it has to do that, but it can't only do that, and still have a thriving, vibrant, equitable community. So, Councilmember Sandine? Sorry.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to belabor some of the things that you mentioned, but some of the things you were saying, Mayor, were sort of along the lines when I was reading this report. One thing was this, to me, when I was looking at the whole set of themes that are in front of us, was, to me, there just was something missing. And so I don't know if this is the right word, but something about, and it could be subsumed under quality of life, but I feel like it's separate, and that's this theme of connectedness. Connected to, do people, can they go where they want to go? What are the metrics around that? And can they discover things that they haven't yet discovered? Because I feel like the connectedness to our community relies on the mobility. And so I suppose, I just was struggling with that because I feel like that might be quality of life, but I feel like it's something a little different. And I too was feeling a little, it was really helpful to see that the TMI Commission really dug in and gave some really productive feedback. I was feeling a little impatient, and I think the impatience may be related to, gosh, we already have this chop, let's go, let's move forward with the actions and things. And the metrics seem a little, just because I think it's just the field, the things you can count seem a bit antiquated. So, I looked down in the safety theme, for example, and the way we're going to metric that is the number of fatalities and the number of serious injuries, not the number of folks requesting safety additions in their neighborhoods, number of police stops for speeding, number of signs going up. So I feel like there's a way to make some of it, perhaps some of the metrics more robust. And I know it said potential performance metrics in the document before us, but for me, I feel like the story's there and we're so close we could just move quickly.
All right, thank you, Dr. Sandin. Councilmember Guerrero.
I just want to say thank you, Sarah, for the report you provided here with us today. Very good start, I think, in taking a look at some areas and giving us a lot to think about where we can move forward. You have a $223,000, grant here, and I'm hoping that's sufficient because I know this is a monumental task for you and others that are working on this. Our expectations, we have a little city that is growing. A little city that is growing with all sorts of different, groups of people that are wanting to be, living here, but also wanting to get out of the city. And taking a look at ways to address the outreach. Looking at maybe the other areas of transportation. So not just here, but between here and the Bay Area, seeing how we can connect with other, the Sacramento, Yolo, any other region beyond that, regional transportation districts and communication with them, trying to find out how we can get the information. Maybe also through the Employment Development Department of the State, the EDD, they have some data that can tell us where people are working and integrating that into, the census is coming up, so maybe we will be getting some more census data. And also an interest on who's planning on moving here in the future. I don't know how we get that data, but we do have a lot of, development projects that are being lined up, and if we can predict who our future homeowners will be. And taking a look at, pop-ups, seeing if we can work beyond West Sacramento. We've got some great ideas that have been given here, but beyond West Sacramento, so that we can get people out of their cars and into public transportation modes. Seeing what it is that would be attractive for them. How would they feel comfortable using these other modes? And, what would it take to incentivize them? Other jurisdictions like, big, counties that have been able to get people out of their cars, what have we learned from those, lessons, and what can we adapt here in West Sacramento? Because we are going to be a pretty, we're going to grow, and there's going to be a lot happening. So what has worked in those jurisdictions for those people that are planning on moving here, that they're willing to just, okay, I get it, that works, that worked when I lived in that area, and I'm willing to utilize it here, and see how we can adapt so that we can, just integrate something that other jurisdictions have tried. But also, just agree with my colleagues, here on some ideas. I think that you got quite quite a workload ahead of you. Thank you very much.
If I may respond to just a couple of points that were made. I'll go backwards, but I appreciate your comments, Councilmember Guerrero, and we do have kind of review of best practices worked into the scope as well. On the topic of the metrics, Councilmember Sandin, what was presented, it really was focused on available data, and so that is something that we're going to be challenged with as we move forward, and based on the feedback here, we're definitely going to work on looking at more quality of life and other types of metrics. But that's always something we grapple with, is actually being able to collect that data and do so on a sustainable, ongoing basis. So that'll be a future conversation that we'll bring back.
Can I just stop you on that?
Yes.
No, I was going to bring up this as a discussion point, and back to my earlier point, that there's data probably available that we're not thinking about. And one came up earlier on traffic, that people are using the Connect app as a way to say there's a problem in my neighborhood. We have a tool that we've leveraged before to gather unconventional data. To fix potholes, we use City data to identify areas of concern. So I think that would be my just things to think about. And I get there's big housing data, big houses of data somewhere that tell you big things, but there's also, the city's already talking to us in ways. And it's like, I think part of my feedback is, in regards to that, is think about those too.
Councilmember Sandin?
No, I'm-
Yeah, I agree. I think and part of the big data that you want to get, I think, is also helpful in that regard, to see the signals that are being sent through actual behavior and movement, in addition to the kind of a supplementary data that we can access, even if it's not permanent data, just giving us some insight, even the data from the VIA surveys that you've conducted and the stuff that we'll get back from Berkeley. One of the things I thought that was remarkable about what you did with the VIA data was you translated it into use cases, essentially, sort of after the fact. But that approach, I think, particularly when you're talking about actual actions and not big policies, is so much more valuable, because the broader data stuff just generally leads you to median solutions that don't work for anybody. Right. And really being conscious of the user journeys for those cases helps to make visible things that you would not see in the data itself if you're just looking at the averages. And as you're forced to figure out why things don't make sense, and though you start to understand some of the other dimensions of the journeys of the people that we serve. So I really like that approach, the design thinking user journey approach, as a way to get at some of these issues, even when you don't have perfect data, to at least force yourself to start thinking from the perspective of a particular kind of person. That teenager who didn't think that she could work at La Crosta across town while living in Southport or wherever. So why is that? What's her real day and options of alternatives look like? Which is totally different from the woman who wants to watch Days of Our Lives, right, in Valhalla. And if we just looked at regular survey data, we're not going to serve either of what they need.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Great. Okay, and then my last response to close is just going back to your comments, Mayor, in terms of kind of clarifying that relationship. Is this a policy document? What is this? And what's its relationship to some of the other existing plans? I think you hit the nail on the head, that's kind of what we're trying to figure out right now this early in the process, and your feedback has all been very helpful in helping us to know exactly how we need to move forward. That being said, I did kind of want to put some things back out there for you to confirm that what I'm hearing is accurate. And based on that, we did struggle. I think we want to make sure we have a clear relationship to those existing guiding documents. But based on your feedback, I'm hearing that it is okay to have some slight departure from that, to push the envelope, to kind of move the city forward a little bit more. And in terms of if we were going to have some higher themes around goals, that it sounds like it should be focused more primarily around innovation, accessibility, and quality of life.
I think that's probably right. As an example, because we already do this, right? In fact, the signature element, the ice cream story is the best example of this, which is now that she's getting ice cream and that the other woman's going to visit Gladys after Days of Our Lives. These are trips that did not happen before. So our VMT is up. So this very first bullet about climate change, is we're running right up against it. We're still doing it because we've determined that for a lot of other reasons, connectedness, social isolation, health, and whatever, that's what cities do. We're not a state agency or federal agency that just has one mission. So we've got to look on the whole. This is not just an okay thing. This is a great thing, and we'll have to get a few pounds of climate emissions somewhere else. But the same thing's true of all of these metrics. There's none of them that is the one ring that rules them all.
Right.
And so it isn't that they don't matter, but they can't be framed as nothing shall happen unless it does every one of these things, because then nothing will happen.
Right. Okay, so I'm taking this feedback as we have the established policy framework existing in other documents, and we have a little flexibility to come up with some great recommendations to bring back to the council in the future. Any other questions?
No, terrific. Great.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Thanks to the team. That's great.
Thank you, guys.
I'm still up here.
All right, that brings us then to item 13, which is consideration of an update on Measure G revenues and disbursements. I thought we had, oh, sorry, no, I thought we had the transit one, sorry. Item 12, which is why you're still here, Sarah. Consideration of a workshop on the Yolo County Transportation District YOLO GO Comprehensive Operational Analysis, the COA to which Councilmember Ledesma has been referring all night.
Yes, so as has been numerously times mentioned, the Yolo County Transportation District is currently working on a comprehensive operational analysis, now known as the YOLO GO project. Jose Perez, the Deputy Director of Operations, is here tonight to provide a presentation with a project overview and to get some feedback from the council. But before he does, I just did want to provide just briefly some items that staff would ask the council to keep in mind in advance of this presentation. First, as the YOLO GO effort is ongoing over the next 6 to 9 months, I just want to remind you that we will be coordinating very closely on the map, making sure that we're talking about integrating multiple modes as part of the bigger system, as well as coordinating alongside the climate action plan that's going to be ongoing. Second to that, I just wanted to raise again the issue that has come up numerous times here at council, and that is kind of the tension between coverage and express or higher frequency services. In light of some of these new and emerging mobility options, are there opportunities for us to potentially modify the system to allow those to fill some of those gaps and focus on enhancing service or frequency on other routes? And then lastly, based on some community feedback and observations, a key consideration for West Sacramento has related to how well residents are being served, especially in regard to downtown connections and airport services. It's just something we wanted to note based on feedback we've received and provided at previous YCTD board workshops. So that being said, I would like to invite Jose up to continue the remainder of the presentation, and I'll be available to answer any questions on coordination afterwards.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you today, this evening. And as Sarah mentioned, I just want to stress that this has been a very collaborative process. Our comprehensive operational analysis is taking a look at our district-wide system network, how is it going to work, not just at the jurisdictional level, but as a region, at the regional level, interactions, interconnectivity, et cetera. Under Councilman Ledesma's leadership and guidance, we actually enacted and are conducting monthly meetings specifically with the City of West Sacramento to ensure that we continue to coordinate with the Mobility Action Plan, and the COA process actively solicits and obtains feedback from the community. That being said, communication is key. We have frequent communication with our consultant team. Weekly updates, and are currently planning the outreach processes, which I'll get into in the next slide. This button. There we go. So a general overview of the project. Again, it's a system-wide assessment, taking a look at everything, not just our operations of routes and schedules, but goes into our administrative policies and practices, funding allocation policies and practices, comparing our existing services to peers, and making considerations and suggestions or recommendations towards improving the future of not just Yolo County Transportation District and its services, but mobility as a whole in the region. We've collected data earlier this year in May, onboard ride checks, collecting actual performance data, ridership figures, et cetera, supplemented with historic information or data that we had available. That information is currently being digested by our consultants team, and ultimately will result in a existing conditions report, not a recommendations report. We're not at that stage yet. I want to just be clear about that. We still are going to be soliciting significant input from the community and our riders. But to set that baseline of where we are today in comparison to similar services and in comparison to ourselves, our historic performance. Following the completion of public outreach, the development of service recommendations and enhancements are going to be completed in winter of 2019. Again, those recommendations will be presented at the jurisdictional level, but also in the context of the district as a whole. And there'll be opportunity for public stakeholder and our jurisdiction members' feedback and opportunities to refine and make sure that we're actually meeting the goals of this project, that the recommendations aren't just somebody's opinion or desire for a service, but rather actually reflect the needs of the communities and our district as a whole. It is anticipated that the YTTD board will be able to approve recommendations, assuming the process is completed according to schedule in the spring of 2020. And it is our aim to begin implementing the recommendations in the fiscal year 2020-21. So in the summer of 2020 is our aim to begin implementing the majority, if not all, of the recommendations, depending on our available resources and what those recommendations may be. This slide represents the existing fixed route network. In addition to the fixed routes that operate throughout the city of West Sacramento, we also have some intercity services such as Route 42 and some express services that connect into the city. And we also have our complimentary paratransit service, YOLO Bus Special, serving those persons with specific mobility needs and impairments. Again, it's just a summary of the existing network as it is today, kind of a spaghetti map of service all over the place. Moving forward, we did conduct a board-specific workshop that our consultant facilitated in June of 2019, focused on identifying the jurisdictional community-specific goals, priorities, and transportation and mobility needs. The results of that workshop included some priorities such as addressing declining ridership, assessing performance with appropriate metrics, and we've had that discussion here, we've heard that discussion here tonight. What are those metrics? And that's what I would love for your feedback on. How do we define those? And consideration of innovative concepts. So we also conducted to date a member jurisdiction discussion. It was more at the staff level, but again, all of the jurisdictions were invited and the majority participated, focusing on what is YOLO Bus's perception in the region, what are the desired services and system improvements, what is the desired outcome for the YOLO Go effort, this comprehensive operational analysis, and how do we pay for whatever we're recommending. Some initial stakeholder surveys were completed the week of August 20th through September 3rd. A few organizations participated, not statistically significant, and it was just an initial effort, but some of the key outcomes of that survey were responses such as buses not frequent enough and buses do not go where I need them to go. Again, these are not surprising responses. These are things that we're all aware of. Desired improvements including improving real-time information and developing a single fare payment system were noted during those surveys. We also like to mention that concurrent to this comprehensive operational analysis, we are facilitating along in partnership with Yolo County a YCTD mission and visioning process. So again, it is facilitated through Yolo County. Councilman Ledesma has been instrumental in getting that set up, but we are planning on having that workshop to, again, kind of look internally with a future forward focus on what is going to be YCTD's mission moving forward and how do we implement that vision and mission. The workshop has been scheduled for October 21st, and we hope to be able to present the findings of that workshop in the coming months.
Busy week, October 21st.
28th and 25th. That's one through my calendar.
I remember, I specifically made sure you were on that, kind of save the date, so
Yeah.
hopefully you did receive that. Again, generally, next steps in our timeline during these next few weeks, our consultant team is going to be completing the existing conditions report. We are going to begin in earnest the public outreach efforts, and during winter this year, December, January, we expect to have a draft COA with some of these recommendations and strategies for improvements at the jurisdictional and regional level, with ideally an adoption of a final plan or study in the spring of 2020, with again implementation beginning next fiscal year. And the desired outcomes being enhancing the system operational efficiency and regional connectivity, strategically connecting bus service to future anticipated demand, support greater transit use and related co-benefits, and engage community in transit planning process. That's the recommended action being respectfully requesting the City Council provide us their feedback and consideration of the development of YOLO Go recommendations. And there's a couple of questions that are on the slide here on the wall that we'd love for the council to consider during tonight's discussion. But I'd also like to, given the discussion that happened earlier, would greatly appreciate council's opinions on how we balance some of those qualitative and quantitative metrics. We would need that guidance in order to make sure, we don't stick to, historic or traditional transit metrics and priorities, and how do we best incorporate those qualitative metrics, what those might mean, and how do those get balanced when it comes down to determining budgets and funding and operating plans. So that kind of feedback would be very much appreciated. And with that, rather than reading all of the questions on there, I think I'll leave the slide up, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or clarify anything I mentioned today, and thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for being here. I think this is a important project, and I appreciate the seriousness with which the district is undertaking it. It's not a big surprise because Councilmember Ledesma does things like this seriously, and it's really important. And it's a big deal in our city, both because of the geographic challenges that we have with the freeway and the port and the rail lines and everything else, making it really hard to run an efficient transportation grid, not just for a government, but for people to be able to move around. To get to just the few places where you can cross the city or cross the river is a limitation on the normal mobility that someone might have in an expansive street grid system in New York or somewhere else. So we face the physical challenges, the distribution of wealth and employment around the city is uneven, and both in terms of wealthier suburbs where there's no jobs, and elsewhere in the city where there's lots of folks who need to get to work and don't have other options. So it's a really important issue for us now, and it's going to be even more important into the future. As you know, the council has, several years back said we were going to spend 100% of our TDA money on transit, which was a big policy change for the city, with the intention that was going to buy two things. One was increased frequency and service, and two, that it would allow us to pre-serve for real the areas of new development, because we were facing a challenge of where if we build a new area or new project where we're designing it for non-single occupancy owner vehicles, but there's no transit running there because there's hardly any people living there, then those folks start to buy cars and insist on parking, and by the time the transit could be viable, everyone's already found another way to get around. So we said, no, we're going to take our TDA money and spend it now to support some routes that may not be ideal in the moment, but because we're trying to train and build a culture of transit riding in these areas that we're building higher density developments in, with the intention of having lower car usage. And so I'm emphasizing that because we did that with a purpose, and I think to some extent, I know part of the concern I've had is we've sort of drifted, or we just spend more money on the same stuff we were doing in many cases, and that we have more resources to do our policy objectives, I think. And so this is a really important way for us to focus on that. And the district does a great job of providing, high quality service to our residents. It's been an important backbone to mobility for citizens all across our city. Things are changing very quickly, and I appreciate the questions that you put before us, and also the data that you're starting to analyze, and it raises some significant policy choices for us and for the district, and they're not surprising to us because we've all been grappling with them. I was, before Councilmember Ledesma, I think I was on the YOLO bus board for 11 years, and most of that time, and including today, there's no way I would catch myself getting on a bus at a bus stop unless I had my smartphone to tell me where this bus was going to go, and when, and whether it runs on Thursdays, or whether it runs counterclockwise on Thursdays and clockwise on Fridays. The system takes a long time. That's how we get to that ice cream story that you heard earlier, to go short distances, and it's cognitively impossible to navigate unless you are a regular user, or unless you have no other choices. And so it's a combination of both the viability of the service in terms of the cost of time and hassle, but also just the challenge for people to understand how to navigate a system that, as you say, looks like spaghetti on the map. And that relates obviously to the way that we've structured the routes. And so, looking at some of the data that you've provided on a preliminary basis, I mean, this, as an example, it points to extremely low ridership in the Bright neighborhood, which is a fully developed neighborhood. We have no additional projects forecast in that neighborhood. We're not increasing the density of development. We're not moving away from automobiles in that neighborhood. And so we go there for a couple of reasons. One is during public hearings over 25 years, people have said, you should come. I live here, and I would take the bus if you would stop here. They either never did, or they're not there any longer, so there's nobody getting on these stops at all. Or because we decided as a council or as a district board that every neighborhood in the city should have transit running to it. And maybe that's not sustainable. If no one is boarding or getting off the bus in the vast majority of the Bright stops, and yet that entire loop that we take in the 40 and the 41, up and around, adds a lot of time. Not just time, but also a feeling that you're going backwards on your trip, which human beings will do everything they can do to avoid feeling like they're not making forward progress, that those things contribute to inefficiencies in the system that drive down ridership. So there's a collective impact of these small decisions that aren't necessarily the case for some of the other modes of transportation. Transit, more than anything else, is dependent on each other's choices. So when we have so for me, frequency of service and speed of service is become more important than coverage. That the theoretical value of serving a street on which no one gets on the bus or off for me personally, at least, has become less important than running it often enough that people on other streets that are proximate to it and might use it, more of them will use it in an effective way. So for me, it doesn't mean, I'm not proposing tonight, yes, you should get rid of the Bright routes or anything. That's a decision that Mr. Ledesma and the rest of the board will need to make. But it is our reluctance to confront those kind of decisions in the past that I think has left us with routes that aren't particularly viable for a larger number of riders. With VIA and the jump options, our biggest challenge at the moment is rides out of the city. I think, and Councilmember Guerrero's emphasized this as well. It's our biggest challenge, and it's not terribly likely that we're a couple of days away from extending VIA service all the way to Houston Davis Med Center and Sac State and everywhere else. So or the airport, so or to UC Davis, or to the courts in Woodland, and so the connectivity to the rest of the county and across the river remains a critical function that only transit can provide. And so recognizing that's the part of the system where transit is the most needed and likely to have the most efficiency in terms of ridership, I think is an important lesson. Whereas before all these other options existed, it was that this is the only option for mobility of any kind. It no longer is. And that's not even counting Uber and Lyft, but it's no longer the only option for generalized mobility. It is the best option and the most efficient option for these distance trips that end up leaving our city. And so that, for me, that framework about thinking about this, where the trips are much leaner and inside the city, but are able to be a much higher frequency in order to exit and to enter, becomes a more important part of the play. The other thing I would say is you're talking about the public participation piece. Just be cautious for the same reasons that we were having this other conversation. Is that if you look at if you were to go back ask a grad student at Davis or Sacramento to go back and look at the last 25 years of your workshops and public hearings and unmet needs hearings and whatever, and take a look at like what did the public say in these workshops it wanted in terms of new stops and routes and all that, and then correlate that against who wrote. I'll bet, I would bet money that it's not a high correlation coefficient between ridership and that form of input, for a lot of the reasons that were said earlier, in terms of who shows up and what we imagine and all the other values that we're trying to signal in our transit system other than actually writing it. And so it's not that it's not a good idea to do, but it needs to contribute to the efficiency and the effectiveness and the equity of the system in a clear-eyed way. And most of us public agencies do these things in part because we want people to feel appreciated, and we want to be the center of attention and be loved. Don't fall in that trap. Right. Focus on participation, at least in our city, that engages people in ways that is going to reveal rides that aren't happening and why. That is going to really be useful to improving the effectiveness and the efficiency of the system, rather than saying, hey, where do you think we should have stops and stuff like that, which sets everybody up for disappointment, or not disappointment and then a really crappy system. And that's been the danger that we've had to live with for a long time. So, but I'm excited about what you're doing and the direction that the district is taking.
And I sincerely appreciate that feedback. A lot of what you mentioned very much mirrors my history as a transportation planner, and how I try to set up these kinds of outreach events. And it's not a check the box event for me. And I never really liked when people tell me what's good for other people, like, oh, well, you have to have service there. Would you write it? Well, no, but they need it. And so we are trying to work with our consultants within the resources and the time that we have available to make sure that we provide at least an opportunity for folks who don't use the service, used to use the service, and maybe in their current mindset would never ever use it. But then ask the questions, as you mentioned, why? Why wouldn't you? What could get you to consider transit? When I do go out to communities and do travel trainings with seniors and persons with mobility impairments or learning disabilities, I never tell them that I'm here to take away their car keys or to replace their options, solely to get them information about how to increase their options and increase mobility. And I think that's kind of one of the guiding tenets when we're talking about outreach for the comprehensive operational analysis, is to identify what the true mobility needs of the community are, of each individual community is, because every community is different to a certain degree. And then how do we meld that together in a regional network? And if it turns out that in the conclusion of the study that the city of West Sacramento, with respect to mass transit, needs to focus on intercity connections or connections throughout the region, that's where we're going to put the majority of our efforts with West Sacramento. We're not here to try. I don't think anybody on this council or at YCTD is delusional in the sense that mass transit, as it has existed in the decades past, is going to continue being the answer for everything moving forward. But there are certain types of mobility and transportation that mass transit, like fixed route buses, do perform better, more efficiently, or just as effectively if they're done in partnership with other mobility options. That's what we're looking to try and accomplish. We have a couple of projects that we're working, well, I won't say they're projects, but promotional campaigns that we're working with the city of West Sacramento, where folks who ride via can, if they get to the transit center, can get a free transfer onto YOLO bus. And from that point, they can ride to the airport, to Woodland, to other social services outside of the city of West Sacramento, or even just to downtown Sacramento if they want, and come back, and the tickets they get are round-trip tickets. So those kinds of campaigns, those kinds of efforts, promoting that first last mile connection where we're not requiring you to walk 2 miles to the nearest bus stop, that's what may very well be the ultimate recommendations, based on what we get from the city, from your council's input and insight.
One of the things that at least I learned when we were doing VIA, I think we all did, was that this, when it first came up, we're like, well, but it needs to go to people's door, because that's what people tell us is, if I'm not going to walk a block to do this thing, it needs to come to my door. But we couldn't operate the service efficiently. I mean, it would cost a whole lot more to go door to door than the one block. So asking people, would you walk a block? Oh, no. I'm used to Uber coming to my door. Would have given us the wrong answer. And the same thing, like if somebody reports in a workshop or whatever, if the bus only turned on, if it came down Linden and then turned on Constitution, then I would take it. Well, sure, but if it does that for everyone, then it's a 3-hour trip to get from Constitution to downtown. So we've focused a lot on that dimension of it as opposed to the real issue, which is am I going to go backwards and can I get to downtown in 20 minutes instead of 45? That's a function of the system, but we tend to ask people about their specific situation, and it's the summation of those situations that leads to a really unwritable system.
The spaghetti map.
Yeah, so that's why the way in which this engagement happened, if it's going to be useful and not, you're really trying to get to that fun, like, you're really trying to figure out, does what matter to you is the walking or the 20 minutes? And it may turn out for some people, it is the walking. It turns out that for them, the walking is the problem. And maybe the bus isn't the answer then. Maybe the answer on that one is for us to figure out how to do via, a special targeted via or, subsidized via for them and say, okay, we're not going to try to solve every single problem with every single system. Right, there are going to be some folks who are better served by VIA and some folks who are better served by the bus. If we try to make both of them completely universal, we'll make them both equally useless to both of the users. And so doing the thinking about the participation in the context of these other modes and being okay with, as we were with VIA, saying, okay, this is not the best option for some people, but it will be a fantastic new additional option for 80% of the people. So it's worth the experiment.
How about the other council members, get their feedback first?
Dr. Sandine, any?
It's really interesting because we were given the attachment of the day and time data collection by route and just to look at where people were getting on and off. Mm-hmm. And I can see what a challenge, it made me appreciate the challenge of figuring out these routes. But it does, if you were just to completely simplify it, it looks like it's our transit center, UC Davis downtown, the airport, and maybe our high school. Like those are the main onboarding, offboarding spots. So then if you overlay that with the connection of our current VIA system, and with the bikes and with scooters and with other ways of getting around, it seems like there's a solution right at our fingertips to make a system that could serve more people. Because it was heartbreaking for me to look at a route that has 4 riders. Because then, of course, the question is, what's the cost for that trip? I mean, we have to be asking that question and contemplating that question, even though for those 4 people, that was their connection. So, but because there's an option, it's just trying to grapple with, okay, how do we help or have the most people access mobility and we make it cost effective? I mean, it's just the question that we're grappling with here. I agree. I mean, I'm the alternate on YCTD, and I think the team does with this big county that's very spread out with our 4 cities and some smaller towns. We have a big kind of issue with trying to have transit work. Mm-hmm. And when you have a car in your garage, and then it's going to take you. When I moved to town, I actually love taking transit when I can. When I visit a city, I try not to rent a car. I try to use other ways of getting around. But when you go like, I have a car, I can get downtown in 20 minutes, or I could take 45 minutes and go on the bus. It's just such a hard individual decision to make. So I don't know that I'm giving you that there's nothing profound in this, you know this, but that's just, I think for us, when we're really the kind of, does ridership justify the cost? I mean, we have to be asking those questions and trying to seek answers for that.
I wonder if maybe as one scenario, that, I mean, given the amount of like AI, software solutions to route planning and what have you, that just look at the, actual behaviors and some of the underlying data that Sarah's buying and everything else but the one thing they don't look at is politics. Right, so if as one, sort of scenario on the table, if what you produced was, here's what an engineering optimized route system looks like forget all the hearings and everything that we just said, but here's what this looks like. Not that we're necessarily going to do that, but it gives us a sense of sort of what mathematically, algorithm-based is the most efficient routing system in the city. I think that could be really useful for us to be able to then engage, because it's not like we would just adopt it in whole cloth, because there are other values that we are trying to advance and connections to other systems. So it's not like we would just say, oh yes, I want that one, I love AI. But it would help us, I think, to crystallize some of these choices about what and what could we achieve if we had that, right? If we had this this fully streamlined system, could we get to 20-minute headways and the sorts of things that might change the game in transit? So I don't know if you thought about this already, but for me at least, I think that would help to get to this kind of at least an alternative, even if it's a straw person.
Yeah, and I believe I understand, and I made a specific note to discuss that with our consultant team, because I think it would be an interesting study to kind of see, this is my phrasing, an emotionless look at what an ideal transportation network in the city of West Sacramento or any of our jurisdictions might look like. And then to start, again, as I asked, weighing the priorities, weighing the qualitative versus the quantitative, and start maybe bringing some of that back in and say, well, maybe if we just added this to here, we could add, a little more quality of life improvements, versus the straight emotionless, it has to go here every 10 minutes kind of thing. And I think that would be an interesting look. So I definitely made a note of that, and we'll just be discussing that with our team.
Councilmember Guerrero.
Just want to say, thank you very much for being here today. I think the partnership, between Yolo County Transit District and, working with Sarah and our city folks, has been ongoing for quite a bit, some time, being on the Public Advisory Committee and looking, so all of us have been in one way or another involved with, studying what's going on with transit. I remember way back when you did some pop-ups in various parts of the city to take a look at our bus routes and how to, consolidate, collapse a couple of them. And it was challenging with those individuals that were reliant on the public transportation to get to work. And so, VIA came along and it provided some solutions. And I'm not going to compete with those here that are very supportive because we have some strong supporters here, and I am very supportive of it as well. For the reasons that have been shared, it has been a solution to providing what we are looking for, providing the frequency and the speed. And I've also looked at it from hearing, public testimony, others that have said, in the evenings when, if I feel it's safer to go on VIA, I'm going to take a VIA ride instead, and it'll pick me up when I need it. So it's, just the accessibility, and those are people that have an understanding of how to use it. So the younger crowd, for example, have that understanding, and the teaching of, and that's going to be the other component, is the teaching of older individuals who have needed it, and that's something our city has done a great job in doing. I think that partnership in working, we already have a lot of the infrastructure in place to do that. And I think that's important moving forward. If we cannot expand VIA, we have to take a look at ways to bridge that partnership. There has been a treatment program that has been added, and it doesn't have a bus line that goes through that area, and I think I've been trying to get more access from Woodland, to that location. I think Sarah's familiar with that treatment program. And I don't know if it's been resolved, but I do know that there's been an interest. And I think, looking at a situation where we do have a need for access to public services or other, businesses that are saying, hey, look, we would like more folks that are relying on public transportation to get access. And I'm looking at, the future of our riverfront. We're going to need to have more public transportation access. Our event this weekend, everybody was parking everywhere. I thought we would like to ramp up quickly and letting them know how to get there through public transportation, what are the modes. So doing something so that we can educate the public quickly that this is going to be, a way to get there without using your cars. And so there's going to be parts of the city where we're going to be transitioning from being able to park up, close by to there's not going to be parking accessible. Mm-hmm. So we want to start preparing that transition process. So it's not of who we need today to be able to rely on public transportation, but in the future, and asking, ourselves and those that are living in there and those that are frequenting the area. They're not going to be folks who live in the area. The barn is growing. We have folks coming from everywhere. And what are we going to be doing to, getting them there as a destination of entertainment? So we're going to have more destinations growing in our city for entertainment, and we want to be able to find a way. It's not going to be parking accessible. We're going to have to try to find a way to increase the use of public transportation of some sort, whatever mode it may be. So blending the two, I think, is going to be critical for us to be able to make those venues successful.
Yeah, it's just this point about the relationship between VIA and the bus and the choice, because sometimes, so for example, the Councilmember Cindy pointed out the one route on the one day that may have 4 riders on it. And when I see those 4 riders, well, they're not all on the bus at the same time, but you see one rider on the bus, you're like, why is this a better choice for them than riding a VIA? I mean, really, because it's not a good choice for us financially. Why is it a good choice for them? Because they're taking this long route and they could just hop on a VIA and then transfer at the transit center across the street. Now that we have this partnership, and maybe they don't know about that partnership or maybe there's some other things. But where we have these folks who may be legacy riders essentially of a route that we don't want to leave stranded, we now have an option. And maybe the reason they haven't taken the option is it costs $1 more. Well, it would be a lot more cost effective for us to just say, for the legacy riders of this route, in this loop of it, or this entire route, for all 18 of you, we're gonna, for the rest of your life, we're gonna cover that $1. That's still way cheaper than running the bus for a week, basically. So, being able to make some of those, just efficiency choices, given the options that we have, would be great if some of that emerges from this, because it is no longer the case that the bus is the last and only resort. So.
Mr. Ledesma. Thank you, and thanks, Jose, and hello. Well, thanks. I appreciate, first of all, Jose, for being here tonight. I know this has been a huge undertaking for the district and staff, and you and Terry have been working diligently on this pretty much all year, and with the consultant, and so I appreciate you coming out and with Sarah providing the briefing tonight for the council. And I really did want to let the council voices, I think you probably hear my voice enough once a month.
Never enough.
And hear them kind of unfiltered. My role is to sort of represent all of this in that 1.5 hour meeting we have in Woodland, and whenever I talk to you or Terry offline. But so I just want to let them have at it. And as you can tell, they have opinions, and strong ones on transit, and it's been a challenge for us. And the notion of kind of the things we were working on the transit district at that board, which I'll get to in a second, come from this place. And it's a place you right away just look at the map and you're like, we're a challenging city, not just because of us 4 or 5 personalities, but we're a challenging community because geographically we have some challenges. We have basically 3 to 4 parts of town that are kind of separated by water and railroads and freeways, and it's hard to connect all of that. And you're tasked with that, and you've been tasked, the district has been tasked with it for 30 years?
37.
37, yeah. And have been the only technology available. I think that's where we are today, is with the last few years of having choices, that has brought us to this point where it has already disrupted us. Our ridership of YCTD has been declining, just like every other district, or most districts around the country have been declining. And as we're all grappling with whether it's gas prices or whether it's the influence of technology and rideshare apps, it's all, the amalgam of it all is sort of what's upon us. The comprehensive operation analysis is important. I'm glad you're here to have it, and it's a once in a lifetime, I think, for us on the board to really take grasp of the district and where we are. It's one of the reasons why, and Jose knows this, he's participating as well. I've asked the board to go through a short but important strategic prioritization exercise. for the exact reasons we're talking about today. So all of us on the board, because we all come from different parts of a very different county, with Winters and Woodland and Davis at the university, and Winters and its ruralness, and Woodland with its kind of different dynamics, and us, which is more in the urban center. We don't get to think about the district in a way very often, other than showing up in that 1.5 hours every other Monday to talk about it. So we're going to go through an exercise of just laying out some short-term and long-term priorities for ourselves as a board, because I thought that would be important as you got this feedback, I get this feedback, we have a different paradigm to where we get the operation analysis. We'll be on the same page around the choices we make and the recommendations we make, and have a little bit longer view, hopefully, around where we want to go as a district and what role and what services we want to provide. So that, coupled with our own work in the MAPS system here, gives us a really unique opportunity between the district and the city. The data you were both gathering and sharing that, and I appreciate you both working together the last year, sharing information, sharing knowledge. And I urge you, and we'll keep prodding you both to keep connecting where possible and share information so that it'll benefit us all. So you can see, as you heard today, the VIA, what we learned from VIA, what we learned from jump bikes, which we haven't talked much about today. But there's data to be gathered there too, and how does it all fit together? And because that's what we're challenged with. We're challenged with, Councilmember Guerrero brought it up, we have a riverfront that is based almost entirely on the use of transit. And the parking there will be underparked, and we know that. And with the streetcar project now kind of behind us, and at least what's the next solution for that, it's still got to be a way to move people around. And we've got to have YCTD in that conversation. We've got to have VIA or whatever its subsequent part is. We've got to have bikes and scooters or hoverboards or whatever else comes next in the transit vernacular. But we all got to, as board members, as transit district and as council members, we're going to serve people and to make sure the bus lines work. I'm not going to provide, I think I've been a promoter of frequency over coverage and all those questions too, and how can we streamline that? And I think Jose, what I would tell you is what you're hearing today is, the thing takeaway I have is we have the green light to sort of be a little bold as we go towards those recommendations and to think about it in this context. And I know we have, we're not, to the mayor's point, is that we know people depend on transit for rides, whatever else, and there might be ways to mitigate that in the future. But first we got to see kind of what our intention is to get people around as efficiently as possible. One of the things that I'm concerned about is, and again, I'm a little influenced by the Climate Commission conversation about the need to get people on the transit. I understand you brought up earlier how VMT may not be hitting that goal with VIA. I think it probably is a little bit, but we still have a bigger debt to make overall, and I don't think we can do it without this service. And we've got to be committed to that. I don't think anybody up here is saying we're not committed to that. It's just, what's it look like? And we don't know. That's the purpose of the outreach and the analysis and finding the efficiencies. But we can be a little bold here and look at it and let us make those political choices. And we may, have to move things around or do other things. But I think that's kind of the values that I think you're going to hear from at least me going forward in how we go about the comprehensive operational analysis. I think one of the things too, Jose, that I just wanted to touch on is around, I think kind of got about it, which is we're looking at the barriers to kind of, what are the barriers for people taking the bus? What are the barriers for those things? And I think if we listen to, as I said earlier, on the mobility action plan you heard this about, you're going to hear it in places you don't necessarily aren't tuning into today, or the data isn't traditionally, and that's why I'm really encouraging you guys to share the knowledge, and you should be a part of kind of listening to what the mobility action plan is getting, because it'll probably help our decision making in the and the COA when we get to that in the spring. And we'll start to see the data now. I know we're going to see it in the next 3 months, But the recommendations and adopting them, we might learn a little more in those months between it. So just thank you for all your work, and thanks to council for going unfiltered and giving your real input. I know this council cares about transit because we've learned so much over the past year and a half, 2 years of having Jump and Via in our arsenal, that we can see it making a difference. And now, I think, at least from where I'm coming from, it's like, okay, now we got this great fixed bus service that you guys are running great. How can we make it better, right? How can we make it fit? And for that, the blending of all this, make it work. So that's my stake in it. And so I'm glad everybody got the chance to hear from Jose and the great work they're doing.
And I appreciate the opportunity again, and this isn't the last, crack at the bat, or, there will be additional opportunities, or if anything pops up, we don't have to wait for formal workshops or council meetings to provide that kind of feedback. It's an ongoing process, and we understand that. Up until that final set of recommendations is adopted, we do want to make sure that we're meeting the needs and the goals of the community, and nobody knows it better than you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jose.
All right, that brings us then to item 13, which is consideration of update on Measure G revenues and disbursements as of June 30th, 2019. Mr. Blumberg. We have a memo, too. Oh, we have a memo at our desk on this.
Yeah, there's change on it.
Oh, same one, yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah. Mayor, members of the City Council, what this report provides to you tonight is a report, kind of a snapshot on how you've appropriated Measure G funds over the last 7 years. We've tried to break it down into some categories. We've tried to give you percentages, so you kind of get an idea of the percentages going to different categories, and the types of projects, and most importantly, how much we've leveraged. And the leverage could be grant money, it could be other city funds, developer impact fees, or other governmental agency funds. So the intent is to provide that information, but also to start the discussion of the EIFD policies. So as you know, the Community Investment Action Plan kind of anticipated Measure G at the time that was adopted. The city knew that these funds were going to be coming back from the dissolution and redevelopment. But we so far have not adopted EIFD policies or policies for the Bridge District, Infrastructure Financing District. So we would come back at your next meeting with further detail on those policies. But this is a good start to review what we've done with Measure G. Next slide, please. So just a bit of background. Of course, the West Sacramento Redevelopment Agency was formed on January 1st, 1987, and for 25 years it was a very important tool, a major tool in the city's investment in land use, in public infrastructure, and economic development initiatives. And so in 2011, when the state of California proposed to eliminate redevelopment, we all started getting ready, and of course redevelopment was dissolved on February 1st, 2012. And so the city, anticipating that we needed a Plan B, developed the Community Investment Action Plan and adopted it in May of 2012. And then soon after, there was the formation of Fund 106 with all the monies coming back from the dissolution and redevelopment going into that fund. And then, of course, the initiative, the Measure G initiative, went to the West Sacramento voters in November 2012, and it was approved by 7% threshold. Next slide, please. So in terms of revenues, I think in recent years, as you've looked at the budget, the budgeted revenues were always between 5.3 and 5.5 million. And of course, they've fluctuated. And so the slide shows you the actual revenues each year. Fortunately, if you take that total number and you divide by 7, it comes in 5.4 million. So right between the budgeted ranges. Next slide, please. So let's just talk big picture about the uses in terms of these kind of broad categories. And again, we've kind of taken these out of the CIAP, as we call the Community Investment Action Plan. So of 24.8 million, about 51% of all the appropriations have gone to capital projects. That's the largest category, leveraging 182.7 million in various funds. That's a rolled up number, but it's very much influenced, as I'll show you in a minute, by some large capital projects that have large amounts of federal and state grants. Other CIAP activities includes a number of things, and I'll have a slide to explain in a minute, but it included 28% of your total appropriations at 13.1 million, and generating 163.9 in leverage funds. Now, this leverage fund is not necessarily state grant money and federal grant money, things like that, but it's more a return on investment that could be calculated as a private investment, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then project administration at 9.6 million, or 21%, is largely staff. It's the Economic Development Housing Department and other staff within the city. So, if you look at that total amount that's been appropriated, and again, the 46.9 million is about 8.9 million greater than the actual revenues, but that's not uncommon. Oftentimes, there's budgeting or commitment of funds where the project doesn't move forward or you don't get the grant, but the total leverage there is a pretty significant number. Next slide, please. So as the largest category, if you look at CIP expenditures, what you'll notice is that obviously some of the projects involve major construction where Measure G came in as the funding gap. So that would be the McGowan Bridge or Village Parkway Extension, and there was a large leverage of state funds. Other projects, there is, like I Street replacement, there's been a smaller appropriation, 607,000 in Measure G funds, but it's done a lot. We wouldn't have gotten the federal grant monies kind of committed without the initial seed money. And again, there was an equal amount contributed by the City of Sacramento. So it was kind of that initial commitment that got us the big award of grant funds. Other projects are kind of interesting because you start out with something that's seed money that would have no other source of funds. So the Courtyard project is an example where you have insufficient Courtyard impact fees to do anything. Measure G came in, and what happened is that project is now ready to be constructed. So that investment was important in moving the project along, and you could take any number of projects there, and it was the same situation where without Measure G, the project would not have advanced. Example would be the study of the Washington infrastructure. That investment led to a point where a project was designed, funds were cobbled together, and Measure G came in on the construction component too, but that project's now complete. And then, kind of finally, looking at just the leverage of grant funds, things like Rayleigh's Dock, where you come in with 1.1 million and you leverage 1.5 of state grant funds through boating and waterways. Classic kind of match opportunity. There was no other source of funds, and Measure G was put to that project, and we were awarded the grant. Next slide, please. And what's interesting is we look at other activities, and we've tried to break this down like it is in the CIAP. And so real estate transactions included a couple of big ones, the loan of $2.1 million to the port to acquire the Stone Lock property, the acquisition of Tower Court, and then also we put funds, about $1 million, into the West Gateway Place project, and that's where the return came from. In terms of economic development activities, and you're looking at that leverage number, maybe wondering what that 160 million is. So what we looked at here, most of that 1.45 million involves the Southport Industrial Park and an agreement that goes back to 1996. And as a business assistance program, that's been very successful, where the city pays some impact fees. We're required by agreement with the owner of that property, but we leverage something. We leverage new construction, and so we looked at it's actually 1.35 million that we paid in impact fees on behalf of the Southport Industrial Park development, and we realized new construction value at 160 million, and that's a conservative number. That's based on building permit valuations, and no doubt it's grown, and it's even more today. The other non-capital activities, I think of these are mostly planning activities, and so it's a source to do things like the Pioneer Bridge, Stone Lock reuse plan, things like that. And again, there's a leverage there too as well, where you can leverage grant funds, but that's more building on the future, doing that advanced planning you need for districts to transform and redevelop over time. Next slide, please. And so, just in summary, we want to talk about the next steps. And so what we're proposing is to come back at the November 6th meeting to present to you some suggestions about budgeting policies for the EIFD. And again, that's something that needs to be done, we think, before we can start making recommendations of budget appropriations. So we've got 2 years of EIFD funds. This past fiscal year, I think we were about 700,000. Next year, the fiscal year, we're at about 1.3 million. So we're starting to realize some real tax increment there. But we don't really have a game plan for how those funds are to be spent. And the same is true for the Bridge District IFD. That again is kind of unique. It's constrained by some agreements in the Bridge District and a financing plan. And it's a subset of the IFD, but we need to adopt some policies that are unique to the Bridge District. The other thing is, with the EIFD, the budget policies would go to the Public Financing Authority. They are the governing body for the EIFD, so we would bring those to the City Council first. We would then recommend to the PFA that they adopt those policies as well. And then this is all prefaced to proposed community investment programs and activities, and then eventual appropriations of both the EIFD and the Bridge District IFD. So, do you have any questions?
It's helpful to see the next steps, because my question to you was how the EIFD Public Financing Agency interfaced with the agenda item. So I didn't know if this should be discussed there first or after the council, but this makes sense to me. I just actually was wondering where the absence of the PFA in the item, so.
Well, to some extent, maybe the first question is the council is the current policies for the community investment fund, are we following the right policies? And because we have the CIAP, but we don't really have like Measure G policies.
Right.
And so do we want to develop those more? With the EIFD, there are some unique issues there. Number one, things like, the legislation allows you to do reuse of industrial buildings. It allows you to do affordable housing. There are a whole bunch of categories of things that, we just don't have a policy for right now. There are other issues that are more unique to the EIFD, because it's really a tool for bonding, and that's why it's a public finance authority. That's their part of it. They issue bond debt. And so there would be policies like, does the PFA adopt the city's debt policy? Do they, in their budget responsibilities, first look at, debt and not so much pay-go? That's more the city council's purview. Anyway, we have to kind of work through those
Right.
things, yeah.
Okay.
Ledesma.
I don't have a comment right now. Oh, I was going to ask a question, but.
Are there other questions? You sure you don't have one?
Oh, I can make comments if we're at that point.
Are we at that point?
Sure. I'm shaking my head that this is 7 years ago, because it felt like just yesterday we were kind of dealing with all this. But I really appreciate the kind of check-in, that's what this feels like, on kind of where our dollars have gone. And you're right, as we did measure in kind of policy documents, I think Aaron had brought this up before, we didn't really have a guiding policy like we did on Measure G, which was advisory, but we felt pretty binding about our intent of what that was for, and we were pretty hawkish around it in some of the early years when funding started coming in about what it could be used for. So we were watching it, we were policing it, but we didn't necessarily have a policy on it. And I'm not sure if we need one at this point. It might not be a bad idea, but I will tell you, looking at how the past uses and what we've leveraged that into, it's pretty amazing stuff. The projects we've been able, and the community impacts we've been able to make, the investments in the community that, and again, it's hard to kind of put yourself back 7-8 years and think about the fact that, we had this agency that we just kind of took all this for granted, and they were able to take care of this, and we had to figure out how to do it without it, and we kind of did. And it's pretty amazing to me, like looking back on it and saying, that we were able to contribute to the Pioneer Bluffstone plans, the Broadway Bridge feasibility, which was, we were serious at Broadway Bridge, but we had to put money into it, and we had a place to go get it. The Clarksburg Branch Line Trail, and there's all sorts of, the McGowan Bridge and the Village Parkway kind of sticking out to me as like our ability to kind of fund those. Again, just really was, and the amount we were able to leverage off it. I think this is certainly a kind of a good way to kind of recap that it's been used for the right sources, and if it wasn't, we probably caught it at the time. Again, I just want to thank you for kind of bringing this back, and I know at one point, Aaron, it might have been you a few years ago, had a map or something that kind of showed where Measure G for the community, where it was actually impacting our communities and neighborhoods. And now it's just become plain old Fund 106, or sorry, Fund 106. And we don't even talk about Measure G, it's just 106, and we're getting money from here. But it was, the voters understood what we were getting at back in 2012, and saw the need for us to capture this money that was coming back and put it back to what it was intended to do. And this sort of report card after 7 years says that you guys and we have done a pretty good job of making sure those investments went back in. So thank you. So now looking forward, the question is kind of what do we need kind of from policy guidance do we need going forward? And it's probably a good idea that we start making those kind of policy distinctions about where it could go and where kind of framing up for not just us, but future councils and staff, that kind of what we intended by this. We've been around here during this period to being able to manage it on the spot and know what our intention was. But I'm probably thinking we probably do need some policy documents and start the process. I think that's what you're asking. Do we do?
Correct.
Yeah, and because it has been 7 years, and what we just got through talking about with Roberta and our budgeting is, we're in good times now, and it feels good that we made these investments, and we leveraged the heck out of those dollars to make the community, to grow the community and to continue our growth, which was our intent. But with the I think everyone has on their radar that there could be a slowdown, and there will be a slowdown at some point here, and the city will have to grapple with how to fund this. And I think it is, people may forget what Measure G did by way of voter-approved, kind of what the voter approval was for. It was made to go towards to continue growing the city and have strategic investments to continue to grow the infrastructure, the economic development, catalytic projects, and this basics that we need in our city. And I want to make sure that it isn't misconstrued that this is a fund for something else. And that's why we kind of took Measure E and made the framework around that to make sure how we spent that was clear to the voters. Same with Measure N. So I do think that for the purposes of this, it probably is a good idea, and to get a policy that this council agrees upon and staff can now use as a guidepost as they're going forward. So I think it's the next step. We're already starting to accrue dollars through that may be bondable, and before anybody can question that in the next 2 to 5 years, whatever it is, I want to make sure they know it was meant for these intent. So.
Yeah, we have Measure G. I mean, it's not in the other chart, but this is the work of Councilmember Ledesma in a lot of ways. And that quick leap from redevelopment going away in February, and us being at that stage by November with Measure G was the result of the post-redevelopment options task force that Councilmember Ledesma led, and Mr. Laurel worked on a lot, Mr. Sturmfels and a lot of other folks and a lot of members of that group for a rapid response that has served us quite well. And the fundamentals, I don't want to burst anybody's bubble. I don't think any voters remember Measure G to me since then. But if they did, the fundamentals we're gonna continue to sequester funds to make investments in the future of the city and in the economic development and competitiveness and infrastructure of the city. In the absence of Measure G, these funds would all just bleed into the regular general fund. And the voters said, that, no, the reason we've been successful is we have had fiscal discipline through the redevelopment agency to be able to say, no, it's our monthly payroll deduction basically to make these investments in the long run. And because otherwise they knew we would just spend all the money every year. And so Measure G's fundamental purpose is to say, no, we are going to always set aside some funds for the long-term investments, and that's what has happened. And these are just this is the inventory of those investments, and it is impressive. It's also a tiny amount of the investments that have to get made. We have a lot. Bridges alone is like $500 million. Road rehab and a bunch of other stuff in the city as a capital need. And then all of these strategic investments to take advantage of all of the great projects that our staff are working on economic development and mobility and parks and everything else that are going to require these matching funds and the seed money and everything else. So the amount of investment that the Measure G and the EIFD are going to have to leverage into the future is enormous, and they're going to be maybe barely up to the task. So I wouldn't want to leave this meeting thinking, oh, look at this great inventory. Let me go home and think of some more things. We have all the things. They're in our parks plan. They're in our they're in our riverfront plan. They're in the Washington plan. We have an extraordinarily ambitious investment plan into the future. And this tool is critical, and it's pretty much, spoken for is not the right word, but I would only take issue with the notion that we do have a game plan. We don't have the play that it's about to go on the field. When the buzzer goes off next, we don't have that, but we definitely have a game plan here. It is set forth in all these other plans, and it's set forth in the documents, the EIFD formation documents, some of the policies that we've already adopted. So this is not an open invitation to say we have even $1 million in the pot. Just wait, and we just don't know what to do with it. No, we have stuff already in the program, and. It's a bonding exercise, but we have a duty of humility to future generations too. that is, we don't know everything today that investments need to be made in. And so for me, it's affirmatively not our job to figure out all of the things for the next 30 years that should have investments, and then we bond all of that money, all of the future money into today and start spending it and lock that in. So I'm not at all concerned that there's $700,000 in the account that we haven't yet figured out how to spend out of hundreds of millions of dollars that we're going to try to leverage over these coming years, because the future is going to keep coming. So we've got time to work that through. So this is a great report. It outlines a lot of the progress that's been achieved with this tool and with the forecasting on the EFD. But it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and it still requires that level of fiscal discipline and the investment that's strategic, related to all of the other plans that we have and all the other investments that are getting made in the city, to be fair. Councilmember Guerrero.
Yes, just want to say thank you, Paul, for the report. I'm new here on understanding, what we can do with Measure G, learning the background and all the information you provided. And the SIP, I didn't know that was the Southport Industrial Park, now knowing what that is. Good leverage of the funding that we do have from that. And taking a look at where the funding expenditure has, taken place the most. Now that I know the Southport Industrial Park was an area, I see it's more blended citywide, where funding was expended. But also when, I remember being on the Economic Development Advisory Commission, and we were thinking of the riverfront and what we could do to build that area. The barn wasn't there yet, but it was a vision. And in taking a look at what we're doing with our funding, what we're doing with projects in the future, balancing it with the infrastructure that we need to have in place together with the projects, because we are leveraging, it is so successful, that we want to make sure that when we provide funding, that we take a look at all the other needs in place to balance that, and making sure that we have all the resources. And I know as we have opportunities that come in, and we're excited, but, and I know our city management is very good at that. And I just want to say I think it's important to take into consideration as we move forward in the future. But also, as we look at some economic development projects, because I think, that is going to help us to continue to thrive in the future, prioritizing things that we can, leverage more money and provide more resources in the future, whether it be, job opportunities, providing a balance maybe with county resources, that the county can provide some resources in some way, whether it be jobs or childcare or other resources. So as we have jobs coming in, we have other resources in place. I remember looking at the general plan when we were considering all the other things, that those were some of the components that we were taking into consideration in moving towards the future. So just, I know we're in the beginning stages of drafting the policy, but just my preliminary thoughts.
And I think, are all three of us on the PFA? Mm-hmm. Is that right? Is that the membership along with a couple of others, I think? Yeah. In order to look to the future. And certainly on the EFD side, we only get those revenues really if we see the development occur, and changes in the property values. And so the investments, especially on the EFD side, for existential reasons, have to be in things that leverage the changes in tax revenue. And so they need to support those development areas and that sort of thing. It's not a general funding, a support for general funding of infrastructure generally in the city. But it really needs to be targeted in ways that drive those revenues and drive the rest of the city's revenues and its economic development as well. We have a little bit more flexibility on the Measure G revenues, but not a lot more in some fundamental way. So I think, keeping one of the challenges we faced on infrastructure pieces is, as growth, particularly in the suburban half of the suburban third of the city, we either you grow and then you build infrastructure after, or you build the infrastructure before and then the growth happens at some point. It's pretty rare that the growth happens that the infrastructure gets installed right when you move in. And like as you're moving the boxes in, the city is widening Southport Parkway, for example. And part of the challenge that I think we're increasingly facing is that we made a policy decision that we were going to make, to the maximum extent possible, invest in infrastructure prior to the growth happening, which makes all the sense in the world. With transportation, the challenge that I think that's before us now is that when those road capacity, for example, gets built far in advance, road capacity, as Dr. Sandine could tell us, gets filled up, right? Even with no more people. Just folks are like, look, there's this wide, empty, no traffic road. I think I'm going to start driving, especially because I watched that city council meeting. They told me how long it was going to take me to get to work on the YOLO bus. So people start filling up the capacity without any additional growth happening. Then when the growth that you were building for actually arrives, it feels as though, like, why is nobody building any more roads? Well, you did that already. You just did it 4 years ago. And so the timing, the policy decision was the right one, but it poses some timing challenges in the way that human beings, when they actually get into these systems, start to change some of those assumptions. And so the assumptions around how we make infrastructure, the temporal nature of infrastructure investments in relationship to actual growth and development, whether it's suburban or urban, for me at least, is becoming increasingly problematic's not the right word, but I'm certainly more curious about how we might tackle some of these challenges that don't create this problematic mismatch. Because I was listening to somebody last week who was complaining that we haven't built any roads since in so long, and there's all this new traffic in the city, but we haven't actually added that many people, maybe like a couple hundred, and we have added all the Village Parkway and the Michael McGowan Bridge and South River Road and a whole bunch of additional capacity, but people are using that already. And so this is it's a community challenge around how to reconcile infrastructure planning over time, that some of these questions around bonding and building early are going to start to raise more and more. So. All right, any other comments on this item?
Did you need anything else, Paul?
Nope.
Thank you.
Comments only? Okay. All right, thank you very much. All right, that brings us to council calendar. Ms. Berlin?
Hey, good evening, Mayor, council members. A couple of events that are coming up in the next few weeks that might be of interest to you. October 12th is the fire department open house at Station 45, and that's from 10 to 2. Then on Friday, October 18th, Bayer Crop Science is doing their annual community service day, and that's going to be at Linden Park this year. That starts at 9. And then as Councilmember Ledesma mentioned, the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change, the Student Summit is going to be on Saturday, October 19th, starting at 9. And it says on the calendar that it's at River Valley High School, but that should be River City High School. And finally, the LAFCO meeting scheduled for October 24th has been canceled.
All right, questions on the calendar? City manager report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a follow-up on an item you mentioned earlier, upcoming on the calendar, the SACOG Regional Futures Forum is Wednesday, October 30th from 8:30 to 5 at the center at 2300 in Sacramento. If you haven't registered yet, you can contact the city clerk and we can get you all registered for that if you'd like to go. I'll be attending. I'm also encouraging our directors in economic development, community development, and public works to attend as well. Sounds like it's going to be a good event hosted by SACOG. And also, another item you mentioned, AB 116, the EIFD bill is now on the governor's desk. There'll be a separate letter for the governor urging signature that the mayor will hopefully be able to sign. And I'll just say in the next few days, we'll get that letter in. And then
tune into the LeBron James show on Friday to see if he signs
who knows where he's going to sign that one. Yeah. Anything's possible at this point. And then one final thing, I wanted to take an opportunity to, since he's still here, he sat through the whole meeting, I want to introduce to our newest staff member, Abraham Salinas in Economic Development, who was a former Summer Steps intern, now the newest staff member in Economic Development. So he had an item tonight that didn't get pulled off consent.
Oh, is it too late?
It's too late, sorry. He made it through. Thank you.
Okay. All right, congratulations. All right, any questions on the city manager report? City attorney report? Staff direction from members of the council? We have no future agenda item requests, so is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Sandy and seconded by Councilmember Guerrero. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.